the best version ultimately is like the most genuine, real, honest, vulnerable you. Like, and this is something my ex-husband used to say to me is like, if I would get nervous for like a big event, he'd be like, just be you. Like, people love you when you're you. When you get nervous, when you get really reserved, is when you clam up. Like, that's when you're not your sort of as likable self. So it's like, learn to embrace, your weirdness, and because that's really what people like.
Right.
Not that the reserved part isn't like your true self, because it is. Like, I'm also like, yes, sometimes I'm reserved, and that's who I am. It's a big part of who I am before someone knows me. And so, like, I've grown to accept that about me.
Hi there, this is Sarah Kuhn. If you are an INFJ or in a relationship with an INFJ or related to an INFJ in any way, and you want to figure out how they operate, what makes them tick, and how to communicate with them better, this is the show for you. It's called The Quiet Ones. This is a show that deconstructs INFJs, what they are, how they think, how they feel, how they operate, and how they relate to people with other personality types. Whether you have just found out that you're an INFJ or have known for a number of years, there is something for everyone. You will learn more about your personality type so that you understand who you are and understand how you operate in the workplace, in relationships, in your family, and with friends. I want you to walk away from every episode feeling like you have a place of belonging, feeling like you are no longer alone, feeling like you have a place to be heard and seen and understood as you really are. This is a place to connect with other INFJs, to learn and grow and really thrive. I want to give you inspiration and real life strategies that are going to help you figure out how to live your best life every single day. Though INFJs are very rare, you are not alone in this world. You are not the only one who thinks the way that you do and feels the way that you do. Hear from real INFJs just like you. Hey there, Sarah Kuhn here. Welcome to another episode of The Quiet Ones. I hope that you're having a wonderful week. I know it's Monday, and Mondays are always challenging for me. Although I have to say, I'm really enjoying working from home. I'm very, very fortunate where I have a job that I can stay home, and it makes a huge difference. I have noticed in the last couple of weeks, though, that I've had a lot of problems focusing. And I'm kind of wondering if everybody else out there is having problems too. We've been talking about it a little bit in the INFJ community, and I've been discussing it with some of my INFJ friends, and it seems like it's a common problem. Maybe it's part of the stress that we're all feeling and going through. But I have turned to yoga. I got a subscription to an app that's called Glow, and there's tons and tons of different yoga classes on there that you can do from home that are really, really good. I've been doing one before I go to bed, and it just makes it a world of difference. I have terrible problems sleeping. It takes me forever to go to sleep, even though I take like 12 different kinds of herbs to help. It makes a huge difference to be able to just shut my brain off, because that's the problem. It just won't shut up. I just keep thinking and keep thinking and keep thinking. And then I notice that it's 3:00 in the morning, and it's like, oh, I'm never going to get to sleep now. So really anything that you can do to shut your brain off. I've also been reading a book as a part of a book club with one of my INFJ friends that's called May Cause Miracles. It's by Gabby Bernstein. It's a really, really amazing book. I might actually do a whole episode and just talk to you about the book, or maybe just a video on YouTube. It's all about, it's like a 40-day process of creating miracles in your life, which sounds really extraordinary, right? But it's also really, really simple, because like the first exercise on day 1 is like, notice your fear. You don't even have to do anything. You just have to notice that it's there. Anytime you feel like you're afraid, just notice it. And having that awareness is such a huge thing. It changes everything, because once you start to have that active awareness of what's going on, then you're able to deconstruct it and say, okay, why am I afraid in this moment? What's going on with that? And I've noticed that for me, fear comes up in a lot of different places. Not only like the global pandemic that's going on, but even in little things, even in talking to people or going to the grocery store. But I mean, I would have been afraid even before the virus too. Even reaching out to people, sending somebody a text message, or saying no. I was in a situation where I had to say no to somebody last week, but that I didn't really want to. But I knew that it was important for me to set that boundary and say, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry. And to leave the I'm sorry part out and to leave out the excuses, because I really wanted to say, hey, I can't do that because, right? And then you come up with this great excuse that I can usually find one that's true, but sometimes they're not true, the excuses that we come up with, right? But I'm trying really hard to say no because I deserve better, right? I deserve my free time. I deserve more time to work on my business. I deserve to put myself on the same level that I put everybody else on, right? So being able to say no and not have a reason behind it, not have an excuse or something to fall back on, it's difficult, but it's really, really, really important. And even though it was super scary, I'm so proud of myself that I did it. And I wanted to tell you that because I hope that you are setting boundaries in your life as well, that you're able to say no, that you are prioritizing your mental health and your alone time, your recharging time, that you're putting that at least on the same level as you put everybody else. And when it comes down to choosing between doing something for somebody else or having enough time to recharge, I really hope that you're choosing to recharge, because it's so important, especially nowadays. Especially nowadays. All right, so let's get to our guest. I am so excited for you guys to hear this interview. Today we're talking to Sarah Woehler, who is an INFJ, and she's a relationship coach. She is from New York City, in the middle of the thick of it right now, and she actually had COVID-19, but thankfully she's recovered and feeling a lot better now. She's answering all of our questions about dating, communicating, setting healthy boundaries, and dealing with high expectations. And just a little bit more about Sarah. Like I said, she's a life and relationship coach, helping people transform their relationships, careers, and lives from the inside out. She's also a writer and the host of her own podcast, which is called Interrelate. Just as a reminder, you can watch the video interview of this podcast on YouTube at youtube.com/thequietonspodcast. You can also find all of the links for everything that we spoke about at thequietonspodcast.com. Okay, so tell me how you found out that you're an INFJ.
Yeah, so I found out that I was an INFJ way back. I think I was taking Psych 100 freshman year of college, took the test, and it was like very clear that I was an INFJ. And that was my first foray into psychology, and it was like, loved it, just soaked up everything about it, and Myers-Briggs and kind of the personality testing and everything. And I took the test subsequently. I think it might have been about 5 years later after that first time, again, INFJ, and then maybe 10 years after the first time, again, INFJ. And I've taken it just for fun, a couple times since then, and the same result just keeps popping up. And I've had friends take it and, partners and whatnot. But it's just, to me, I read something about this the other day. It's basically like Myers-Briggs is like astrology, but for intellectuals. And I think it's an interesting thing because I love astrology as well. But
right.
It's provides so much insight. It's so scarily accurate. And I think, especially with INFJs, we comprise 2% of the population. And I think for people who feel generally misunderstood in the world, it just resonates. There's so it's I think it's a unique, well, it is a unique personality type in terms of like statistically for people, but it's that combination between being relatively social but definitely a true introvert, so needing to connect intimately with, especially on a one-on-one basis, but really needing that time independently to reset and recharge. So I'm a huge advocate for Myers-Briggs. I think it's not the end-all be-all, but it's a really powerful way to kind of understand yourself and understand other people and how we connect and relate. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It kind of gives you like that permission to feel the way that you feel, and to realize that people have been telling you that you're wrong for your whole life, and you're like, no, wait a minute, I'm not wrong. It's okay that I'm this way.
Yeah, and to just be like, I think, there's this feeling of being misunderstood. And that's like the thread throughout my entire life of being like, not necessarily fitting in, like getting along well with people, but feeling like an outsider always. And as I grew to understand my personality type, I was like, that's okay. It's okay to feel misunderstood and maybe to embrace that feeling of being a little bit of an outsider. And I think there's the feeling of being, there's a little bit of originality there that comes from like being misunderstood and being an outsider and having different perspectives and thoughts about things. That's not always the popular thought or the typical thought. So I think that's given comfort, throughout my life, and it's been really helpful.
Yeah, it's helped me to give other people grace as well, and to give them space to say, okay, I know you don't understand me or my perspective, and that's okay, but that's going to help me understand you a little bit better too.
Totally. I like that. I like the use of grace too. That's interesting. Yeah, that's powerful. I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you get to be a relationship coach?
Yeah, good question. So I got my undergrad in English and creative writing, and went on to get a master's in English literature, and kind of had an interesting career path. I've done a number of different things. I landed up in content marketing, working for some big companies like Under Armour and Shift, which is now a subsidiary of Target. Tech companies, Williams-Sonoma. But in that process, I've always had kind of something that I've done on the side, which has been writing, blogging. And a few years ago, I left my nearly 10-year long marriage. Really challenging decision. I was married really young, and made that decision to leave for a variety of reasons. And through that process, sort of, went on a different kind of career path, but also a creative and personal journey. And as a result of that, I got certified to become a holistic wellness coach through IIN, which is the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. But the path I wound up taking, or not the path, but subsequent to that certification, I decided to channel kind of my learnings from that and my own personal experience from marriage and subsequent dating, and my passion in helping other people and personal development into more of a life and relationship coaching focus. So that's kind of the area, or the path subsequent to the certification that I've taken. So it's been interesting. It's been something that, I just love helping people, through their own struggles, especially with respect to relationships. I have a podcast as well called Interrelate, where I talk to various relationship experts about relationships and divorce, marriage, having children, friendships, all of it. And so it sort of, is to me just I feel like I have this reason to be on this earth, which is to help people and make a difference. So coaching has been just a natural fit for me. So
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to talk to you too, because I get so many questions about relationships.
Yeah.
And I'm the worst person to talk to, especially when it comes to dating. It's not my thing. I avoid it like the plague because it just feels so terrible for me.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like torture, honestly,
Yeah.
because it's like you I don't like wasting my time.
Mhm.
And I feel like I have this weird concept around dating because, you know, a lot of it revolves around apps these days.
For sure.
And
Totally.
how much can you really know about somebody based on their picture and two sentences that they put together that look like the two sentences that everybody else has on their
Oh,
profile?
there's a lot of that out there for sure.
Yeah, so then you have this whole, now you have to start a conversation with somebody that you don't know, which I don't do. I
Yeah.
never do that. I order Starbucks through an app so that I can avoid talking to people.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So yeah. All right. Well, it is fascinating for me. The dating apps have been. It's interesting. This is where I feel sometimes like a little bit more of an extrovert because one-on-one dates to me are enjoy, in a sense, enjoy. I mean, they're taxing for sure because it takes a lot of energy. It's sort of an interview process,
Yeah.
but there is something I feel like everyone has a story. And so I've, I've been in a committed relationship with someone for the past year, which has been amazing. But, before that, I've been on quite a few dates and, it was sort of an interesting psychological exercise of getting to know someone. So in some ways, totally, it was taxing and exhausting. And then on the other hand, it was like to hear someone's story was really interesting. So, but to your point, there's no way to know someone based on their profile, especially where a lot of people, it is like a marketing sort of exercise of putting the most flattering photos to sort of generic sentences that I think people feel like they need to put like, oh, I'm into White Claw, I'm into these like super generic basic things that will resonate with the masses. And
Right.
as an INFJ, that's like not, it's the least appealing things to us. So I hear you on that. But yeah.
Yeah, and then, starting a conversation with somebody that you don't know, it just feels so awkward for me too, that
Yeah.
when you actually get to the point of you're sitting in a restaurant or for
Yeah.
coffee or something and you're like, what do I talk to this person about? I don't
Yeah.
know them. And
Yeah.
if you don't instantly click or if they don't start the conversation, then it's like, this is really weird. I don't know what to say.
And well, it's like, where do I go from here? Yeah,
Right.
sure. That's a challenge. I think in those cases, at least in my experience and kind of in the advice that I've given to other people, is it's like always go into it honoring yourself, number one, and being confident in who you are. And sort of like be prepared to have an out if you need to, and that's something I think I wrote in the article that I wrote for your website with the tips on dating in your 30s. It's,
Mhm.
you know, a first date is in some ways, like I said, it is an interview and it is kind of a getting to know you exercise that may seem a little shallow, but I think it's like going into that, almost have a template for yourself and almost have, something that you can have an out and not just like, oh my God, I'm trapped and I need to get out in 45 minutes, but to sort of know that it is going to be limit that first date to a certain time period and go into that and manage those expectations with the person you're seeing. So you can just like not tap yourself. And I think, as introverts, as INFJs, we are so empathic and like feeling another person's energy that takes a lot, it takes a lot out of us. And so to kind of go into it with those parameters, those boundaries set and say, I've got something at 3:15, just heads up on that before the date starts. So that you're kind of like, you do have that out and it was like a natural end to the first date. I've found to be really helpful.
Yeah. Another thing that a lot of us struggle with is high expectations.
Okay.
And it's so difficult, especially for me. I have a list.
Okay. You have a list. All right.
I have a
I've
list.
had this since I was like 13. So I hear you.
It's like, if you don't measure up to the list, I'm not going to waste my time. And that seems kind of like really cold and really mean.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time, I feel like there are certain standards that I want, like certain things that I want, certain standards that somebody has to meet.
Oh,
So how do you balance having high expectations, but then also being realistic?
for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think about that. I think about it not only with respect to relationships, romantic relationships, but friendships. I remember distinctly being in like the third grade. And, I always had friends. I always clicked well with people. But I remember having this one friend and sort of saying to her, I feel like our values aren't aligned. And having this like very adult conversation about, having, and that was me having like these high standards about a friend needing all these qualities to kind of, and I think that's always been, I've always been really conscious of who I surround myself with. And it's important. Like, I think Jim Rohn says you're the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So it's really important to have people in your life who are quality, who are adding value. It's obviously a two-way street. So that definitely for me has extended to romantic partners as well. And I think it's okay to have a list. And I think it's okay to be real with yourself and honor that you have high expectations. I think what's really important, and I've thought about this a lot because I've heard from clients and other women who have these high expectations, is to just sort of be like, okay, I have this list, but am I that list? To not just think, okay, this is the kind of person I want, this is what I want, this is what I need, but to counterbalance that or balance it out with like, am I those things as well? Because it ensures that you're reflecting on growing and developing as a person, and you will attract who you are. I think that that's true. And so, like I said, I've had a list since I was 13. There have been things that I've let go. I mean, at that age, it was very strict. It was very like, traditional. And now, it's very different. And so I think over time, as you evolve as a person, there are things like the height requirement, or, certain things like dating someone who has a child or not. There are tons of men out there or women for that matter, who have children who are incredible, and have grown a lot from that experience. So I think it's like having a little flexibility with the list and being willing to be surprised. And then also, being reflective on, am I the list as well? And I think
Yeah.
can be helpful.
Yes. I love reevaluating your list.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a lot of dreams and desires and expectations that I've had for a long time because I've always had them, because, I've had them since I was 13.
Yeah.
And I've just always thought that that was how things were going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I never took the time to say, okay, is this something that I still really want? Does it really make sense for me right now? Or is it something that I want because I've always wanted it?
Exactly. There is a lot to be said for like, we evolve as people. I think we are who we are when we're born, and our personalities are like very ingrained, but we evolve, through the environments we're in, the people we meet, the experiences we have. And with that, I think the list is going to be flexible and valuable, or should be, with time. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you get to be 35 and you're like, okay, since I was 13, I wanted to have 5 kids. And
Oh my
you're
gosh. Yeah.
that's not really very realistic.
I
Maybe
mean, you can always adopt,
if I marry somebody who already has 2 or 3 kids,
Yeah,
we could just add and that would work out.
totally.
It's
It's
fine.
definitely doable. I think dreams should never die, but there are creative ways of making them happen too. So,
Yeah, they may not always look like what you thought they would, but it could still happen.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of debate about what personality type an INFJ should date.
Yeah.
Like what's the right type? I have my own ideas that you in my blog, you've seen it.
Yeah.
But I want to know what your opinion is about what types you think is the best type or the right type, or however you want to say that.
Yeah. So, I'm not a black and white person. Like, I think there are lots of different types. I was reflecting on this question. I think it's a great question. It's fascinating. I've definitely, like, when I've been in dating mode and gone on a couple dates with someone, I would be like, oh, what's their type? And are we compatible? I think ENFPs definitely for sure is like someone, I'm going to give two answers. So the first answer is ENFPs in some ways are a really good match if you're kind of thinking that an extrovert is a good counterbalance to the introvert energy. And in some ways, like ENFPs are like the external manifestation of what an introvert or an INFJ is. Whereas we're really in our heads, we're dreamers, curious, like very like deep inner world. ENFPs are kind of like out there doing it. And so it's really fun it's an interesting and fun pairing because they're like, let's go do this. And it's a little less scary, a little less threatening. And they do empathize, I think, with a more introverted personality type. They're not crazy out there, or at least they're willing to kind of modify that extrovert energy. And then the other type, and I need to look on my phone because it's the logician.
Logician?
Yeah. Oh, that. Yes. Yes. So INTP. And that's who my current boyfriend is. And it's been really interesting because they describe it as like the golden pair. And it was like on a first date, we just like understood each other. It was very easy, the way we communicated, the way we talked, the sort of dreams we have, the respect and admiration we have for each other is just very like this. I mean, we're different, but there's like this really nice overlap that makes being in a relationship with that type really easy. So, and then, I think other INFJs are a good option as well. I'm always really excited, just in general, not romantically, but on a friend's level, to connect with fellow INFJs because I'm like, they get me. Like, we're sisters or whatever. It is just like a very easy compatibility, obviously, because we're like the misunderstood ones. So to find that is really, really cool. So those were my three. What's your answer?
I love that you said INTP. My niece is an INTP and we get along really, really well. So I know that relationship works well.
Yeah.
Obviously not a romantic relationship, but more like a friendship for us.
Yeah.
I have this idea that an INFP would be just completely amazing. And I've spoken to several people who are married to INFPs and they say that it is completely amazing. And it's like, because you're very similar in a lot of areas, but then you're different in the fact that they're more spontaneous and we're more planned. But they understand a lot of our daydreaming and imagination and our thought processes. And the difference, though, or one of the other differences is that their feeling is introverted, so they're always thinking about their feelings, and our feeling is extroverted, so we're always thinking about other people's feelings. So they are able to help us process our feelings.
Totally.
Where, they're constantly thinking about theirs, so they process their feelings and they know how they feel and they're good to go. Whereas with me, especially, sometimes it could take me 3 to 6 months, sometimes a year, to figure out how I feel about something.
Because you're so focused on the other person or the energy. Yeah, that's
really. And a lot of times for me, I don't even know what I feel. I know I feel overwhelmed and I know I don't like what I feel, but I can't name it. I can't sort it out. And I go to my friends and say, hey, this is what happened and I don't know how to feel about it. And they're like, whoa, you should feel like this and this, and this is how I would feel about it. And a lot of them are different personality types. So I kind of take all of their advice and sort of sort through it. And I guess that's why it takes so long, because it's like, let me overthink this for a while and ask everybody else's opinion.
That's true. Yeah. Do you do any like journaling or sort of meditation?
I do lots of journaling. I tried meditation and it felt really difficult for me. I think because it is such a foreign concept for me that I love yoga, and I know that there's kind of a part of yoga meditation.
Totally. I think yoga is super meditative. And frankly, I mean, I think there are forms of meditation that are less like sitting on a wood floor, cross-legged style. I think walking meditations, different forms are really powerful as well. But I think it is like tapping into, especially because we're also pretty gut oriented, like the answer is usually within us if we slow everything down.
So I feel like whatever type that we pick at least for me, it would have to be an intuitive type, because
Yeah.
there's so much difference between a sensing and intuitive personality that they just don't understand when you talk about, I just know. I just get, you know?
Exactly. I would agree. Yeah. And I'm even trying, I don't know. I'm sure I've been on dates with, S types, but yeah, I think that just wouldn't work. Just like
Yeah.
not, yeah.
One of the other reasons that I'm kind of stuck on INFP, and I don't know if that's going to happen, like I'm not going to limit my list that strictly. I'm trying to put it out into the universe and see if something comes my way. But one of the other reasons that I like that is because I'm very introverted, like 90% introverted when I take the test.
Okay.
And so I have this desire to have somebody that I can be alone together with. I don't want an extroverted person who's going to drag me out.
Totally.
And, have a bunch of people around all the time. I don't want that at all. But I know that there's a lot of us who are very introverted, and we need a lot of alone time. So when you're talking about dating and relationships, how do you work around all of that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's something that comes up a lot. I was reflecting on this question earlier, and that's something, I mean, for me, it comes up regularly. I get tapped out. I think because INFJs, to your point, they're constantly thinking about other people's emotions and feelings and this sort of stimuli that we're always bringing in. It taps you out. And so to me, well, with respect to relationships, I think once you get into a relationship, hopefully the communication is strong. And I think establishing an open communication style at the beginning is critical for sure. And that's something I'm a huge advocate for, is that, radical communication, which is hard for some people, but there have been times, and I can think of one relationship where I was in a few years ago where it was with someone who was an ENFP, and he would just want to be together all the time. Like that, he loved being together and, spending the entire weekend. And inevitably, we'd say we spent the weekend together. By Sunday night, I would sort of just be like, oh my God, I am like, I can't do this, and not in a mean way, but it would just be, but I would be so distraught with myself because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. But at the same time, I wasn't honoring my need for alone time. And the first time I communicated it to him, it was a little late. So I probably should have honored what was happening within me sooner and then communicated it to him. But it was kind of like I had hit the wall, and then I told him, like, listen, can you leave because I need some me time? He was hurt. He was like totally hurt and thought that I didn't want to be with him anymore. And it took a few instances in order, of that happening before he understood. It wasn't that I didn't love him or I didn't want to be with him. Well, I actually didn't want to be with him at that moment, but it didn't mean that I wanted to break up with him. It just meant I needed some Sarah time. I needed some alone time to recharge. So I think communicating that early on and just being real, like, listen, I am an introvert. It doesn't mean that I don't love being around you, but in order to be my best self, I need to just step back and recharge. And that's never going to go away. And how can we set that up so I'm not hurting your feelings, or so that, you get your needs met as well. I think the great thing about our personality type is we're like, if we need that time, we want you to have that time, and every relationship I've been in, it's been, I think my partner's been like, oh wow, like you really respect my desire to go surfing or go fishing on a Monday night or do these things, because we need that and we respect that. And so it's kind of a win-win, especially when you communicate it early on. To your question about with respect to dating, I think that's a little bit different. I've definitely been in situations where like dating has tapped me out to the point where, I'm not taking as good care of myself. I'm not getting to the gym on time. And then I'm just like, this is not fun. This is not dating. It's not fun. Whereas some, I think, more extroverted types are like, oh my God, I'm so excited to be dating. This is like, how could you not like that? It's so fun. You're going out, you're meeting people. It's not, INFJs want that deep connection. And dating is very surfacey and very transactional and very, going through a bunch of people and like, ultimately the goal of which is to find the one, but the process is painful. I think honor that and set it up the way that it works, in a way that works for you. Whether, for me, I think, having one day where maybe you go on a few quick coffee dates and then don't go on dates the rest of the week, so sort of chunking it out in a way that's efficient. So you're just getting ready for a date or 3 dates once, versus like throughout the week, going to a bar and loud, noisy restaurants after work or when you're really busy with other things. It's about the balance, and it's just being true to your end goal. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, it definitely does help putting things together.
Mm-hmm.
It helps when you schedule things on the same day, because it is very taxing when you have a bunch to do the one day, but
Right.
you only have to get ready once, which for me, I hate.
Yeah.
And you only have to psych yourself up once.
Totally.
And it's like, okay, I can sit through this today, and the day before and the day after, sometimes 2 days after, it's like, okay, this is my self-care time.
Exactly.
But if you split it up over 3 days, it's like 3 days where you feel like it's a lot. But when you're just doing it one day, then it's like, okay, I can suffer through this one day, which feels like a lot, and then be okay for the rest of the week, like you said.
Exactly. And I know there's this thing, I'm sure with all introverts, but especially, I don't know what the term is called, but sort of like the dread of a social event where you're
Yes.
dreading it for like days. And yesterday I had like a bunch of things going on, and well, really this past week, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm every day sort of amping up or anticipating that like thing it's draining, right? And so to just do it one day and then, be able to anticipate, like you said, the self-care time after as like a little reward, it's great. And then I do think once you get through those, the first dates are kind of painful, and then you meet someone that is amazing, and you're like, okay, this is now fun. Once you get to a point of meeting one or two people that you kind of want to see for a while, that part of dating is more enjoyable than like those dreaded first dates that require a lot of energy and kind of willpower to get excited about or amped up about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important to keep that goal in mind too. I lose sight of that sometimes. I went for coffee with a new friend that I met through my Instagram, who's an INFJ, and I was really excited to meet her and talk to her, but it was like coffee at 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. Like, who scheduled that? What kind of person was I trying to be when I scheduled that?
Plus, convenient, probably, or efficient, right?
It was the only time that I had available, and it was like an hour drive for me because she's north of Boston.
Right,
but so like the day before, it's like the dread, like you were talking about, and then even the morning of, I'm trying to talk myself into going and not talk myself out of going, and I get there and it's like, I don't know where to park, and it just turns into this whole thing, and the whole time I'm going, why am I doing this? I shouldn't be here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And then I get there and I'm like, oh, I forgot to think about what she looks like. I don't even know who this person is.
So funny. That's so interesting.
And it was good that she recognized me, but then once we sat down and started talking, we talked for 3 hours. Like, now she's a new friend and we're going out again, and it was this great experience, and it was like, okay, all the dread was worth that because it turned into this really amazing thing.
Totally. The work is usually worth it. And I think when you're going through that exercise of dreading or anticipating or worrying, I think it's like, have compassion. That's something in the past couple of years I've really tried to exercise. It's like, you know what? It's okay that you're feeling that way. like, don't beat yourself up for being, oriented to worrying about things or getting a little like drained in anticipation of a big social event. Just be gentle with yourself and say, you know what, that's okay. And for whatever reason, every time I do that, I'm like, oh yeah, I can, like, my shoulders drop down. I can, like, take a deep breath. And it's like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay to get nervous. It's okay to be flustered. It's okay to be misunderstood. It's okay to not fit in. It's okay to not enjoy big parties. Like, that's okay. And that's what makes you you. So embrace it, and just be gentle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It,
think it's helpful.
it's part of that whole perfectionism that we have
Yeah,
where we do everything right the first time. And
so true.
especially in that situation, because again, we go back to having all these expectations and you want to present the best version of yourself, and then it ends up being counterproductive.
Yeah. And the best version ultimately is like the most genuine, real, honest, vulnerable you. Like, and this is something my ex-husband used to say to me is like, if I would get nervous for like a big event, he'd be like, just be you. Like, people love you when you're you. When you get nervous, when you get really reserved, is when you clam up, like that's when you're not your sort of as likable self. So it's like, be learn to embrace your weirdness, and because that's really what people like.
Right.
Not that the reserved part isn't like your true self, because it is. Like, I'm also like, yes, sometimes I'm reserved, and that's who I am. It's a big part of who I am before someone knows me. And so, like, I've grown to accept that about me. But to just really practice, just be you. It's so simple and it's so trite, but it's true. So
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. So tell us why somebody would hire a dating coach and what kind of services that you offer.
Yeah. So, my focus really, certainly dating comes into it. I like to kind of frame it as a relationship coach, because, to me, relationships stem not only just romantically, but dealing with, family issues, or, social sort of friends dynamics in the workplace, relationship with self, which is really like the number one thing. But coaching is a little bit different than therapy. I'm a huge advocate for therapy and coaching both. But what I like about coaching is that it's a little more tactical. So therapy, you see a therapist and you kind of talk about your feelings, but they're not necessarily giving you, they'll give you advice, but it's very limited. Whereas coaching will be like, all right, let's talk, let's really get into the meat of the problem, let's process it together, and then let's develop an action plan for how to address, what's going on, and be held accountable. And so I think with respect to relationships, like, it's the one thing that everyone struggles with. It's hard. Relationships are hard, and getting along with people and making it work is a process. There's a reason why divorce rates are so high. There's a reason why there are always like familial dynamics and issues with friends, or struggles with loneliness, which I think is an increasingly growing problem, especially in the United States and beyond. But I think there's a big need, and I think my approach is really just having an open dialogue and having that safe space for someone to feel like they can process the issues they're grappling with, and then to develop that sort of strategy for how we can tackle those issues together. So, yeah.
Awesome. So do you do one-on-one coaching, or do you do group coaching, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I do one-on-one coaching. That's kind of the primary means at which I provide advice, but I've also do, coaching with couples. So I've done a session where actually this couple had broken up and wanted advice on whether they should continue a friendship or how they should interact post breakup. So I've done sessions like that, which I think is really valuable. I've done sessions through Zoom, like we're doing, or Skype, FaceTime, so remote services, phone services as well. And then, group coaching is something I'm exploring as well, and kind of like we talked about earlier, kind of expanding it to more of a workshop format as my practice grows. So.
Awesome. Tell us where we can find you, your website and your social media.
Yeah, so website is sarahwoehlercoach.com. My last name is spelled Woehler. It's pronounced Whaler technically, but it looks like Woehler. And then I'm on Instagram as Sarah Woehler as well. Twitter, Sarah Woehler 10. Facebook, you can find me. And yeah, I'm out there in the universe, so feel free to look me up and reach out, ask me any questions you may have.
All right, that's all that we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen. It helps other people to find us. And we will see you again on Thursday.